Greg, welcome back to the podcast, my friend.
Hey, it's always good to be here.
Well, just recently you were sharing in one of your sermons about the beauty of the body of Christ, the church, and how it all has its functions and everyone serves in a variety of capacities. And I really appreciate it. Was really neat how you shared that, just that it's all of eternal significance and it's all important, it's all valuable. And that's great. I guess maybe it just prodded me to think about, and you also shared a quote from Charles Swindoll, and he said something one time that I really like this quote, and I think it ties into your statement from the sermon. He said, living an unselfish life is an art. It does not come naturally.
Yeah.
Because to connect the dots, like service is required to do those things, to function in those roles. Why is it do you agree with Charles on that one? Why is it that is not a natural thing to us?
Yeah. I think we can get into service, but just first and foremost, he's embracing the reality of what Scripture says. We're all fallen. We're all selfish. We're all self-enamored. So, true service implies doing something selfish or selfless for other people. And obviously in the context of this conversation, it's serving the kingdom of Christ, which Scripture's pretty plain, may not have a payoff on this side of things. Beyond, again, intimacy with God is well worth it. You can't put a price on obedience and its value in our lives. But from a selfish man perspective, from a fallen man perspective, even that message that I preached makes no sense to somebody who's all about, getting what they want for themselves. Because until you embrace the idea that we're called of God to be a part of kingdom things, this whole conversation we're about to have just doesn't add up, doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So you got to start with relationship with God, and that opens up a door to have the Spirit of God who then can show you our selfishness and ways in which we're not being mindful of serving others. How does someone, I know for me, there was a portion of my life where I was on the sideline, so to speak. How do we encourage people to even evaluate, is that, the Mark 10:45, for even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. How do I have some check and balances in my life? If I know you shared on the podcast, and from we can be foolish, our flesh can get the best of us. It is strong. So how do I be mindful of that and even ask the question, am I growing a servant's heart?
Yeah,
we can be selfish on a daily basis, but I guess that's what I'm saying is, am I growing in that? How do I move towards that in my life?
Yeah, I think, folks probably wouldn't like this, but I say the first big step is to see yourself at the bottom of the rung. We've had some interesting things around church where I don't want to be too specific, but I know there was one time where I met someone on a Sunday. And a part of the first time I met that individual, they were talking about how they wanted to preach at our church. And I remember thinking, whoa, unless you're Charles Stanley or Swindoll or somebody, you're a long ways away from getting an opportunity to preach in our church. Even if you're super gifted, we're going to have to figure out, are you sincere? Are you real? Do you have a real relationship with the Lord? And what's your motivation? So I would back all that up to say, the best place to start on all this and developing a servant's heart is challenging yourself to see yourself as, I hate to say it, our world loves self-worth, but as the lowest of the low, as the servant of the servant, as, Jesus talks about, he got into an argument with Peter where he's like, I'm going to wash your feet. And Peter's like, no, you're too good to wash my feet. Yeah. And no, to truly understand service in the kingdom, you have to be willing to do the most menial task. And, I think our church is like most other churches. The people who reach that place of maturity where they're willing to do the most menial tasks rarely wind up just doing the most menial things. Usually those are the ones that you see that servant heart and you see that self-sacrifice, and you're like, man, we got to find them something important to do because we trust them, we believe in them. And, and again, gifting matters and all of that, but I think you want a servant's heart, first thing is quit telling everybody else what you're willing to do and just step up to the plate and say, hey, I'm willing to be a nobody. If that means I'm going to take out trash, I'm going to take out trash. Clean windows, clean windows. I mean, just make yourself available to the lowest thing, and then trust God with the rest of it.
Yeah.
You know?
Do you think so many times that you're referencing like the scene positions, like, hey, I want to, hey, I'm ready to preach. Like he comes to church for the first time. It's like, but we have we don't know if he has a servant's heart. So there's been no display of that. How much do you think people's desire to please others or to be seen by people impacts like the unwillingness to go there? It's like, I'll serve, but only if I'm gonna, only if I get these prestigious, we've now made it a weird thing now because it's not seen like that a lot of times. Yeah. How much does that affect people's perspective on it?
I mean, I think that's human nature. And I think that's where we have to, in all of this conversation, we're not having a conversation about the way the world works. We're not looking at this like a civic organization or even a public school environment or some corporate job. That's the way it works in the corporate world. Yeah. Is you get a certain pedigree, you get a certain background, education, experience, and then you slot into whatever tier you're supposed to be on, and you begin, you're a leader and you're bossing other people around, and you have all these marks on your belt. That's the way the world works. The church doesn't work that way. What's Jesus say? The first shall be, last, and the last shall be first. And I think it applies to this conversation. We don't know who God has intended to be in a place of authority in our church, not based upon education or looks or any. I mean, those standards don't apply to the kingdom. Yeah. God sees the heart, and so on all this, I think we have to take a step back and realize, there's common sense, there's practical, there's some real things that you can't skip over. You're probably not going to allow someone to preach or teach who can't communicate effectively.
Yeah.
But you know what? There's some really good preachers, teachers, communicators who, to the world's perspective, just doesn't make sense. And so we want to see what God's doing, and I think that's probably one of the big challenges of this whole conversation is none of this works the way the world tells us it works.
That's good.
It's kingdom, and Christ's kingdom, God's kingdom is so radically different, and that's why, again, you got to be in the Word to develop an understanding of how God does things, because He's countercultural.
So is it possible God will sometimes surprise us with the things that He calls us to do? And so if our baseline is, okay, we look at the life of Christ, we see servant's heart, like this is who He is. Like, so we don't get to be like, well, I'm not going to do that. It's like we don't. It's like if we're going to follow Jesus, this is a key component of who He is. So that has to be a key component of who we are. So we understand that, we agree biblically and with God. Okay, God, like I want this. How do we then? There's so many ways to serve. Even if you look at it, our church, you got the various ministries we have from like birth to senior adult, and there's all kind of ways to serve in there.
Yep.
You've got, oh my goodness, we could, you've got everything from kitchen and clean up there, from providing meals. You've got disaster relief. You've got, we could look at it even, well, I guess we'll pause there for a second. Like, how do you, let's say you've got someone come to the services, which is great. Like, that's awesome. We're happy you're here. But also we know it's a little incomplete. Is that fair to say? If we're just like, the goal would be that, now there might be a season. We've had conversations before where like a college student was just in a season where they were coming to the service, and for that part of their life, it's like, that's really what they could give. And so it's like, man, I'm glad, I really am. Like, thank you for coming. And just understand, hopefully, that as that season shifts, like the goal would be to give back more, right? Than just the service. How do we find out? You reference giftings and talents and connecting those dots. Okay, I want to have a servant's heart, but I don't know what to do. Like, how do we even get started with that?
Yeah, well, it's easier said than done in some ways.
Okay,
I think the first thing is people do have to understand church doesn't just happen on Sunday, and I would say not just church, but kingdom work doesn't just happen on Sunday, and so. Yes, get to know staff, make yourself available to staff. When, we put something in the bulletin that we need some volunteers for this, that, or the other, it's kind of like that idea of put yourself in the lowest place. Don't always evaluate, am I good at that or not? Have I got any experience at that or not? But just volunteer, step up, say, sure. I don't think that's for me, but I'm going to show up and give it an old try. And what happens is you get to know people and you learn more about what's happening at the church. I think sometimes people, they're like, well, I feel called to go to, whatever place. Well, it may be a year or more before we get to go to that place. Yeah. Why not go to San Diego first, or go to, I think people just can be way too picky or choosy about, the point of being a servant is you serve. And so find something, jump in. And like I'll admit, the other day I had, there's a servant-hearted guy here at our church, and he was asking when we were going to have another, we do block parties and we serve at different schools where we've done hoedowns and different things. And it's a great opportunity. You can pop popcorn. You can help kids play games, give away candy. If you get a chance to have a evangelistic conversation, you want to do it. But part of it is just serving that part of the community and the church, and we want to be a partner to the public school system. And so, there's opportunities to do that. Well, he had done a lot of that, and he was just really servant-hearted guy. He was asking when the next time we were going to do that was. And, as pastor, I'm thinking, I don't know when the next one's scheduled. And he walked off. And then about an hour later, it dawned on me, I'm like, hold on, we're doing that 8 weekends in a row with Upward Basketball. Yeah. Even more intentionally, we get to share the gospel with the teams. That's right. And there's, speaking to the crowd and all this different stuff. And in my brain, though, when he asked, I thought, well, he's not athletic necessarily. He's not bent toward basketball. Well, half of what Upward requires in terms of servanthood has not dependent upon whether you know basketball or not. You can run a clock without knowing basketball. You can sweep the floor. You can sell concessions.
You could sit in the stands and just talk to people.
That's
honestly.
right.
Like
you can
really
build
could,
relationships with the people that are there. There's a lot of them that have questions about our church, and there's so much to do. And so in my brain, I'm like, here I am, even as pastor, I miss the mark sometimes because you pigeonhole and you assume, and we called him back. There's got to be a place.
But I do appreciate what you're saying, because I think that's one flaw and one immature. But going back to something you said about sometimes we want to say, well, that's not really my thing.
Yeah. I
appreciate you saying that, because I wouldn't be in this role right now had I hid behind, well, that's not my thing.
Yeah.
Because, I was offered an opportunity to talk to the youth when I was a young 20-year-old, and I was like, I'm good. Like, I'm behind the scenes, that's my thing. And I was kind of challenged, like, hey, let's step out of that. Let's not, and so I had a choice to make. Like, am I going to hide behind, this is not me? And then God surprised me. And I do think oftentimes we can kind of use that as a good excuse. Well, I don't know basketball, or I don't know how to run a chainsaw. I can't do it. It's like, there's a lot of things to do with disaster relief than just run a chainsaw, right? So, I do love that you challenged us with that, because I think that has to be a key component. Because at what point, or at the end of the day, are we going to trust ourselves, or just like, okay, God, for whatever reason, you've put this on my mind and heart. I'm a little nervous. I don't feel like I know what I'm doing, but I feel like you're asking me to do it. So here we go.
Yeah.
And then really cool things can happen when we step out on a limb like that. So I love that challenge.
Well, we're not good in our culture of being self-aware. So there's lots of things about ourselves that we don't even know or understand. And that's why I think you kind of put an unconditional yes on the table. I feel called to serve. Don't get too choosy about what that looks like. Just get in the game and volunteer somewhere and let God kind of guide you through it. And it tends to work.
Yeah. Let's do this with our remaining time, because I want to make sure in light of this conversation, we've considered ourselves a Acts 1:8 church, appropriately so. Will you talk to us about that? Because when we have opportunities to serve, you have opportunities both locally, but it's not just locally. You mind speaking to that, just for maybe people are kind of new to our church and they're figuring out, okay, I get it that we have various ministries happening here. Are there things outside of that?
Yeah.
I think there are. You might share.
Yeah, I think there are. Again, Acts 1:8, the Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth, we try to always make sure that there's opportunities. And sometimes it's just through your giving. It could be through your going and your service as well. But that we're always allowing people to reach, our own church, our local community, our state, our nation, and then the world. And obviously, the further you get away, the more likely that's going to be some sort of missions agency. But also, we support the Lottie Moon Christmas offering for international missions. That helps fund missionaries that are doing work in the Sudan, and we're all over the globe. And so, again, we may not go to every country in the world. We got opportunities. We do try, even in our mission strategy, we try to have something active in almost every major region of the globe. We have something in El Salvador for South or Central America, and we have San Diego, which is more of our stateside emphasis, and we have something in Guinea, and we have something in the Himalayas, and Kathmandu. Southeast Asia. We try to do that, but even if we're not going to a region, if you give, we're sending money to benefit all those regions. And then you back that closer to home, and we try to make sure that Upward is reaching a certain slice of our community. Awana's wide open for people in our community and certain ages of kids. And like you mentioned, DR is a great ministry that you could be serving in Appalachia because of a hurricane, or Oklahoma when there's tornadoes, or even in our own. People don't realize that our DR teams go, and if someone has a tree fall on their driveway and they're older and they can't deal with it, our DR team will just go out and clear their driveway for them. And that'll happen independent of any storm. Or the DR team has done a lot of work like that, helping people. And again, like when they mobilize, there are mobile kitchens. So you have people who are cooking, you have people who are just serving, you have people who are just cleaning up. They run shower trucks. So you're just checking people in and telling them which shower is open.
Yep.
I mean, you don't have to be gifted at that, but then there are people who have to clean those showers to keep them sanitary for, in a certain situation. Then you got your chainsaw crews. You have just your pickup crews where people literally, they're not trained to run a chainsaw, and or maybe they're not physically capable of running a chainsaw all the time. So they just pick up brush. And then you have your people who don't do any of that. They just visit with the property owner and try to have a spiritual conversation with them. And guess what? Because someone's cutting their tree down, they're pretty likely to talk to you. That's the kind of stuff that's happening all the time. And, we do our missions banquet. One, it is a night of fundraising to some degree, but really it's vision casting. What do we do in terms of missions? And, we're blessed that Arkansas Children and Family Ministries is getting ready to open a local office in Russellville. They're going to do counseling for obviously adult men and women, but also particularly for children. They're trained in like play therapy for really young children who maybe wouldn't naturally. You can't ask them a series of questions and get them to really answer and explain. They have ways of ministering to those, and we're going to help them financially run that office, but obviously that's a ministry we support and we can refer people to when there's needs. And you come to Missions Banquet and you're going to find out all these different things that we do, that we serve, and that as a church member you can jump in and serve. And Gideon Ministry, they got so much going on that the average church member doesn't even know about. And how you find out about it all is come to the missions banquet, listen when we make announcements, when we identify someone who's doing something, go ask questions. We've promoted like CASA before, which is the special advocates for kids in the fostering system or the DHS system. And if you got questions about that, my wife does that. I can let you talk to her. I mean, there's so much out there. The problem is we can't have worship and preaching on a Sunday if we just stand up there and go through all these opportunities. But if you're faithful in your church attendance and you go to missions banquet, you're going to hear about a lot of stuff over a period of time.
For sure. Do you think part of it is also because I'm sitting there listening and go, man, we're going to leave something out. There's so many things. And so, and I love it that that's a good problem to have. There's ample opportunity for people to connect in. Is the approach then not should I serve? Should I? But like, God, where are you asking me to? if is it fair that one baseline we want for all church members, us including, is that, hey God, what are you asking me to? Is there something where is it, like, because that helps me be mindful and watchful. In other words, if I don't have that kind of watchful eye, those announcements are going to come. I could even sit in the missions banquet and I could miss those things, right? Because I can be kind of blind to those opportunities because I've got a rhythm to life. I don't have space for that. I don't have room for anything extra, right? Like we can find ourselves in that spot. So as part of it, having just that baseline of like, okay, is it a fair challenge to listeners and all of us? Like, okay, God, where is it that you want me to go? Not should I, but like, God, where? And then if you've got it, great. Like that's awesome. But having that mindset to help us be watchful, I guess that's really what question I'm asking. How do we help to be watchful of those opportunities? So when we are at church and we hear it, or when we're out in the lobby and someone's talking, or I've seen, we promote, was it the first all ladies chainsaw crew in Arkansas? I was like, that was kind of cool. Like I saw that picture, like that spawns it, like, oh, okay. So like we're going to have things throughout the year that are just things you're going to see, hear, read, podcasts you're listening to, they're going to like have a thought. So how can we help ourselves be watchful so that we're ready to jump on those opportunities when they come?
Well, I think it does begin, hopefully, like we're establishing this conversation, service to kingdom causes is a mandate. This is not a if or should I. I mean, I think we have to understand that if we're saved and redeemed, God has made us for good works, and those good works tend to be, there's lots of, prayer is a work. I don't want anyone to ever, I'm going to preach on it probably by the time this podcast comes out, that there's a mandate in Scripture to be active in prayer for people in our communities to get saved and other things, but we're called to serve, non-negotiable, period. And so you should be serving. And I think that's the mindset. You got to walk into church on Sunday, and this is so countercultural because we now live in a society where people show up at church and they want to be served. And it's, what are you going to do? What are you doing for me? It's like, I arrived at Disney World and I'm paying money and you provide a service. And it's so backwards. You don't come to church to be served. You come to church to serve. Now, a stage of life matters. There's times where, young families in particular, it can be hard to think, well, how am I I can't pack up and go to Mississippi on a chainsaw crew because I've got 3 kids at home under the age 6. And well, no, you can't. And that's where, again, your mindset should still be, though, I'm called to serve. First and foremost, I'm going to serve God. I'm going to serve my wife. I'm going to serve my family. And I would honestly say when our kids were younger, my mentality was, I don't have time to go find something that runs upstream away from my kids. So I'm going to find a way to serve with my kids.
That's good.
Which, I started upward when I had little kids that wanted to play ball because I thought, I don't want to turn them over to this world system out there where they're not getting any spiritual reinforcement. They're not, we started Upward Basketball, and that became a great place of service for me when my kids were younger. And I would still say, you got kids that like sports, elementary age, man, just 8 weeks, jump into Upward Basketball. It's good. So simple. But even when my kids got away from Upward and we went to the soccer complex, my brain was, I'm going to serve this team that my kids are participating on. I'm going to try to get to know these parents. I'm going to try to invite them to church. That's the easiest place for me to serve the community, is where I'm already going to be. And I get it. When my kids were younger, I didn't have time to pick up some new pet project somewhere. But my kids are going somewhere. I'm going to go with them. And
no, that's a good shift, because so many times I think when it comes to kingdom work, people forget, A, home and family is kingdom work. And then B, they think that they get caught in the trap of the enemy, which is a lie of, the kids are holding me back. I need to get, and so I love that challenge of, hey, no, for A, kids, because I love, that's dual effective. A, it's getting you involved in community, but B, it's your kids are a part of that. So it's helping both take place.
I have a harder time finding parts of the community to interact with now than I ever did when kids were my natural entry. I was always mixing shoulders with people and meeting new people. And,
I like that. So if you have young kids, that's a cool challenge to don't see the things your kids are involved in. It's not just for your kids. Like, that's your opportunity
Yeah.
Don't miss that. Because I hear you saying, man, I don't have that anymore, is what I hear you say. I'm right in the thick of it. I'm like, we're coaching 2 upward teams. And, it's there. So I think that's a good challenge, because I can get caught up in, like even this week, I got 2 practices back to back, 2 games back to back, and I get caught up in just it's a lot. Like that. Yeah, that's demanding. And I can real quickly miss that opportunity of, hey, I'm here to. This is not just me checking off the list and like, all right, now I got the rest of my Saturday free, but I can get there. It's like, man, I'm struggling right now, and so I love that challenge, and it's a good rebuke to me. It's like, okay, these are opportunities to serve, and don't miss that connection.
Well, and I think part of what I didn't know this at the time, but it came to fruition, and I would encourage somebody like in your shoes. Okay, so you're coaching 2 different teams, the kids different age groups, I guess.
Yeah.
But out of one of your boys' teams, odds are that they're going to remain buddies with somebody on that team, or they're going to play football with one of those, or they're going to do quiz bowl with. I mean, those kids in that age group, if you stay in the community of Russellville, you will see them as they grow up, and you will see their parents multiple times at every award ceremony or this, that, or the other. Yeah. And so you've created a community that now over the next 8 to 10 years you have a possibility of influencing. A lot of the buddies of my boys growing up, I was able to speak some truth into their lives and be around when certain things happened, and I think they still feel comfortable in our home.
That's good.
Because I knew them I met them when they were 6 years old, and I saw them every day until they graduated high school, and even some into college. And
that's good.
You have that opportunity. You just don't think about that when you go off to Upward every week for 8 weeks. It's like, man, well. But here's the reality. Some of those parents and some of those kids you're going to probably see multiple times every year for the next 10 years.
And that's where we're kind of hitting at, and that's the side of it we've talked a little bit about, but I want to make sure we make a point. When you do jump in and serve, man, there's so many benefits, both to, I think, us individually, just between us and God. Some things, to your point, it's like we're not doing this to be seen. Sometimes things are outward, like they're like people see you preaching every Sunday. You're serving. I mean, that's just your role. You're not looking to be seen. That's just your role. Some are not seen. You mentioned the trash. Not everybody's going to see that, right? But we do those things, and we get benefit from that. Like there's a contentment, there's a peace, there's a fulfillment of that, and that's good. And then also, there's a benefit to other people, like all those kids that feel comfortable coming to your house.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
And I think that's cool. Are there other benefits, just to kind of conclude that, because that's one side of it. We can look at, there are certainly sad parts about just missing out on opportunity to serve. But man, when you see those and you make the most of them, there's some cool things that happen.
I mean, we haven't even talked about the eternal side of rewards. And, I'm convinced Paul particularly, he's got verse after, you just, Google rewards, like in early church stuff from Paul, and it's over and over and over again. I think of 1 Corinthians 3, I believe, which is where he talks about wood, hay, and stubble, and how it's all going to pass through the fire, and, what passes the test remains as a reward. Acts of service going to pass the test, and like you're saying, it doesn't care whether anybody else ever sees it. It doesn't matter if it's up front or behind the scenes. God's evaluation is not going to worry about what man thinks. God's going to evaluate different. And, he's got a lot of specifics, about crowns and all these different things. I'm convinced one way or the other, there's going to be an eternal reward for acts of service. And yes, I think we're going to put some down at the feet of Jesus, and it'd be nice to have something to lay at the feet of Jesus, but also think we just simplify heaven and we make it sound like it's a utopia and everybody's the same. No, there's no reason to evaluate rewards if we're all going to be rewarded the same. Why is there a fire? Why does it pass through the fire? Why does Paul say what remains will be reward? I mean, it'll be different for everybody. That's
good.
And that's a motivation to me to serve. And
I like that.
And I think we're going to be there that day. And, it's not judgment. You're not judged for your sins.
Yep.
But I think we're going to see some things, and maybe part of the fun of heaven will be, I did not know he did all that. He didn't tell anybody, and I don't know.
I like that, because you're right. There's benefit we do have now.
Yeah.
But the greater is what's ahead, and I'm with you. And it does remind me of your sermons through Revelation.
The Heaven series and
The
Revelation.
Heaven series are great because and I'm immediately thinking of how you talked about that. And they'll be like, it's a kingdom and there's responsibilities and there's tasks. And like, depending on what we do here and that's kind of neat. So, and I think that, do you think God, I want to believe that God did that. Like, it's okay that that's a motivator. Like, I know some people will say like, well, it should be enough to please God. Okay. Yes. But he did that. Like, and is that okay? Like, is that okay that makes me happy? Like, it makes me want to jump in and pay more attention to and be mindful of what God's asking of me, because that's kind of cool to think about.
I think so. And even, again, like that principle, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. I think there's this statement, okay, so people see me as being the pastor and I'm up front on Sundays. I don't think that guarantees that when we get to heaven, what I've done is going to be any more valuable than someone's done behind the scenes.
That's right.
I think it could all be flipped.
Well, if we take you out of it, like, let's just say a pastor, and that pastor is a complete immoral, evil person behind the scenes,
the fire, and there will be no reward.
There's no reward.
There could be judgment.
So it does. The service doesn't equal rewards.
Correct.
It's the heart. It's doing what God's at. Yeah. I appreciate you saying that, because it's always broken my heart to see Christians kind of put stuff on pedestals and other things, and it's like, wait a second.
Yeah. So whatever God has given you to do with all your heart and do for the glory of God.
And it's of just as much significance because it's what God's asking you. That's where we land with it. And I love that. And I appreciate your heart on that. And it feels like that's what we see in the scriptures.
I think it's there.
I love it. Well, thank you, my friend. That's a great conversation. And, shout out to all our things happen in our church. So if you're here, I would just challenge listeners, be mindful of it. If you're serving currently, like, thank you.
Yeah,
because we do have it. It's
Amen.
fun. If you walk around on a given week, like, it's just fun. Like, that's neat. There are so many people serving and stepping up. And so thank you guys. And, that's a great example. And for everyone else, and some of those positions are seen, some of them are not seen. If you're playing an instrument on Sunday morning, I was watching Georgie. He's just having the time. I love that. Like, you could just tell he was just serving God in LA. He's on stage, but he's just serving God. There's nothing, and I love that. But you might be holding babies back in the back, and I love how you have helped us see that. And I've heard you say that over the years, and I think that's so healthy for us to just hear. It's all of significance. So, and if you're not currently serving, like, hey, let's just baseline. Where is it? Where is it God's leading you to? Yeah. So thank you guys. Until next time.
Yes, sir.
God bless.